Oh, how I wish I could be with you all in person right now. This is a most unusual Sunday. Here we are in the moral aftershocks of watching our own demons as a society play before our very eyes. The words of Audre Lorde come to mind when she said, "Your silence will not protect you." Rarely is it so clear that silence and inaction are sins of omission. We may not know what to say or do on a day like this, but we must speak and we must act. And so together we travel through a difficult time as a nation and even as a people, but we do it together with our hands outstretched, even through all of the distance between us, because we are one community, hoping for one love and one truth to lead us on. Dave, would you help us begin our worship by kindling the chalice?
Thank you, Fred. Good morning. As is our tradition, please draw your chalice or candle near and join me in reciting the words that we use to light our chalice. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love, which calls us to work for justice.
Good morning, everyone. I am Marcy Boder, and I'm your Director of Faith Formation Ministry here at Valley UU. If you have any children or young people in your house who don't want to miss out on our story, now is the time to get them organized in front of your device. In the meanwhile, we have just a couple of quick announcements. There will be a congregational conversation today immediately following the worship service, so please remember to stay connected. Our pastoral team, the screen is up for you, has a listening ear if you need to contact someone. The email address is pastoralcare@vuu.org. So the story that I have for you today comes in a time of unprecedented stress and worry, and we will be talking about responsibility and irresponsibility. But here is a gentle reminder of the power of compassion. His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, "The potential to build a more compassionate century and promote a greater sense of oneness among the whole of humanity lies with the children of the world." Enjoy this story.
The Seed of Compassion, Lessons from the Life and Teachings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, illustrations by Bao Lu. I was born in Taxter, in the Amdo province of northeastern Tibet. It was a place of tall mountains, clear streams, blue skies, and many animals: mastiffs, sheep, horses, yaks, scorpions, chickens, and cows. Our home was in the shadow of the Ami Churi, the mountain that pierces the sky. Mine was a family of farmers. My father would spend the day tending to and selling horses, and I would stay at home with my mother and help her with the daily work. We would plant barley, buckwheat, and potatoes, but those were not the only seeds we planted. From the time I was very young, my mother planted in me the seed of compassion by the examples she set. She raised me on a diet of love. It was often my job to collect the eggs from our hens. I took my duty very seriously. While my mother cooked, the aroma of kore, a delicious bread, wafting from our kitchen, I would play in the courtyard with scorpions for company. Sometimes I would sit on the roof of our house. It was the perfect place to watch the mountains reach toward the sky. I'd imagine what the older boys were doing as they accompanied our fathers herding. I couldn't wait to be big enough to do that. My other favorite perch was atop my mother's shoulders. From there, I felt like one of the older boys. I was taller than my father, and getting around was so easy. When I wanted to go left, I would simply tug on my mother's left ear. When I wanted to go right, I would give her right ear a tug. And if she didn't understand my instructions or chose to ignore them, I would kick my legs. Although my mother could not teach me to read or write, I learned so much from her. I was often a naughty boy, but she always treated me with kindness. Sometimes I think she may have been a little too patient with me. I was a bit spoiled. But that was her nature. She was this way with everyone around her. One year, when there was a famine in our region and many families did not have enough to eat, my mother gave whatever food we had stored to our neighbors and those in need. She showed me that it was possible to treat all people with warm-heartedness and to help ease their suffering. Like a tall tree never forgets the seed it sprouted from, I've often returned to the seed of compassion that my mother planted. As a small child at home, as a young monk in training, and today, as I spread the message of compassion around the world. When I was almost 3, monks came from the capital, Lhasa, looking for the child who was the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of the Tibetan Buddhists. No one in my family could have expected that I was that child, least of all me. But after passing a series of tests where I correctly identified the belongings of the previous Dalai Lama and held them with a great sense of familiarity, our visitors were satisfied that they had found the boy they were looking for. And so, at age 4, I made the journey to Lhasa in a caravan. It took 3 months, and as news spread, more people joined the procession. I rode in a beautiful palanquin with my brother. We were rambunctious boys, and every time we roughhoused inside the cozy cabin, we would knock it off balance. We had to be separated for the rest of the journey. In Lhasa, after I turned 6, my formal education began, and my days were filled with studies. In the few hours I had for personal time, I loved to puzzle over how things worked. I would spend hours taking apart toys, clocks, and watches and putting them back together again, or exploring the mechanics of movie projectors and cars. This occasionally got me into trouble. As I trained to be a monk, I studied many subjects, like Buddhist philosophy and history, logic and reasoning, metaphysics, poetry, medicine, Tibetan, and Sanskrit. One topic that I loved was compassion, because of the seed that had been planted by my mother. I believe that is what led me to free the people held in the prison next to Potala Palace, where I lived. I have spent my entire life studying this topic, and I know it is my duty to help make the world a more compassionate place. If you think about it, when it comes to the 5 basic senses, we humans are not all that impressive. The elephant has a long nose and can pick up faint scents from much greater distances than we can. The hare can turn his tall ears forward and backward to pick up sounds that we would miss. The eagle has eyes that can spot the tiniest prey from far up in the sky. It is not the use of our senses that makes us special. But only humans have the ability, with discipline and effort, to train the mind. It is what makes us different from all other animals. It is our superpower, and it is where the seed of compassion thrives. You already have the ability to see genuine compassion in others. Think about this. When you're playing in the schoolyard and a group welcomes you with a smile, do you want to play with them or with the group who scowls at you? From self-confidence grows compassion, and from compassion, strength blooms. Compassion is based in the mind, the part of us that is uniquely human. It is where you might grow strongest and how you can create something positive in the world, because compassion is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. We must protect and nurture this seed. When someone disagrees with you, ask yourself, why might they feel this way? When someone is upset or hurt, ask, what might I do to help? It takes practice. Tomorrow presents another opportunity for you to try again. I have many responsibilities in my life, but helping to make the world a more compassionate place is the most important one. We cannot change the past. We can only learn from it, but the future we can change.
Hi, everyone. Katie Seifert here, the Director of Music Ministries, and I am back from maternity leave. I want to thank you so much, for your love and support during that time. I think you'll see Gavin is in the background. Here it comes. But I wanted to thank the music committee, especially for stepping in and offering your talent and your time to make sure that the music kept going while I was out. Thank you to Noelle Hyman, Barbara Metz, Mary Rothschild, and Rebecca Riggs for your help with the music committee. I also want to thank all of you that gave financially to us through the GoFundMe account or the meal train. Thank you to those who brought meals and baby supplies. We got so much baby clothes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. From my family, we love you all. Just want to say thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure he'll be debuting more. He's our little fussy guy right now. But please join me in singing our first hymn called One More Step.
One more step, we will take one more step till there is peace for us, and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word till every word is heard by everyone. Will say one more word. One more prayer, we will say one more prayer till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song, we will sing one more song till every song is sung by everyone. We'll sing one more song.
Once again, good morning. My name is Dave Jude, and it is my pleasure to serve as your worship associate today for today's live Zoom service. Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation is an active, loving family, and everyone is welcome. Whoever you are, however you define yourself, whoever you choose to love, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. And whether you are a VUU member, a regular attendee, or maybe you happen to be checking us out for the first or second time, you are welcome here. Also, for newcomers following the service, please stick around. We'd like to get to know you. If you are visiting and would like to know more about our community or about Unitarian Universalism, send a chat note to our minister, Fred Wooden, or stay in the main room after today's congregational conversation to visit with him. This morning, Reverend Wooden will speak to the moment and reflect upon the events of the previous week. So, how was your last week? A rhetorical question that I likely already know the answer to based upon the unprecedented and seditious events that we witnessed unfold on Wednesday in our nation's capital. More on that in a moment. But I want to take you back to last Sunday, because that's really when my anxiety level began to escalate. You'll recall that was the day the state reported 17,000 new cases of COVID-19. Some hospitals were and still are operating at near or over capacity. The week's COVID positivity rate was 26%, and all of the benchmarks to allow for safe schooling that were set up by the Maricopa County Health Department were and still are in the red. And with our 2-week winter break complete, I was admittedly dreading going back to in-person learning the next day. I posted on Facebook that I was feeling helpless. While other districts in the Valley were planning sick outs and other school boards were scrambling to at least consider other alternatives, I knew neither were realistic options for my school, even with students and some colleagues traveling over break or gathering with friends and family who don't live in their household, it was guaranteed we would be returning to in-person learning the next day. Even with students bragging about hosting and attending a super spreader 500-person New Year's Eve party in Southeast Gilbert, and the chance that some of those students would be in our classrooms just 4 days later, it was still full speed ahead. The state superintendent of public instruction suggested that all schools return to virtual learning for 2 weeks, a 2-week quarantine period, if you will, to account for the travel, parties, and holiday gatherings that I spoke of. A sensible idea that was quickly shot down, not by the governor. He's apparently too busy, not sure doing what, to publicly discuss the state's atrocious rate of getting its residents vaccinated. No, he had his spokesperson release a statement simply saying the governor would not be considering that. So it was hi ho, off to school we go for myself and many other teachers around the valley. My mom texted me every night this week to ask how my day went and how I was feeling. Early in the week, I ran into my superintendent, who asked how my break was. And I told him it consisted of spending time with my wife and daughters and worrying every day about the growing number of COVID cases and the clear lack of a statewide vaccination plan, since there was never going to be a national plan under the outgoing president. Another colleague asked how my wife Teresa was doing, knowing that she has lupus. I told him that as long as I stayed healthy, Teresa would stay healthy. But that was a heavy responsibility to carry around. But my health doesn't just depend on my decisions. It depends on everyone else's. To not travel in the middle of a pandemic, to wear a mask whenever you're out in public, to not visit with folks outside of your household, to not hold or attend holiday parties, to not tell my wife that she's sick, so she should just stay home while everyone else goes about their normal lives, to not tell Teresa that COVID is here and she should just learn to live with it. Of course, the problem is she'd likely die with it. Unfortunately, the pandemic has shown us where Teresa and her lupus fall on many of our family and friends' priority list, and it's pretty far down. However, I had a coworker at the school's radio station tell me this week that she didn't think it was right that as a 1B employee at a school, she should have access to the vaccine before Teresa, who's classified as 1C. She was quite serious when, bless her heart, she told me that if she could swap places in line with Teresa, she absolutely would. So after a few days of processing the anxiety and fear of returning to in-person learning, Tuesday happened when the good citizens of Georgia had their voices heard, giving hope that the incoming administration may actually be able to pass legislation that can get the country moving in the right direction again. But the celebration was short-lived, because then there was Wednesday, a remember where you were when this happened moment. My watch started going crazy during class with news alerts about armed rioters and treasonous criminals storming the steps and breaching the entrance of the U.S. Capitol building. So-called supporters of the outgoing president, essentially executing an order given directly by their cult leader to stage a coup to overthrow a legitimate election by stopping an American tradition, the official counting of the Electoral College votes. By the time I was able to get to a TV, the images were horrifying. Rioters and looters running through the Capitol building with ease, standing at the podium where the vice president had been overseeing the Senate just minutes earlier. The Confederate flag being proudly carried throughout those hallowed halls. A picture of a Capitol police officer assisting an elderly woman who assumably had no trouble getting up the stairs with the mob, but was being helped down the stairs instead of being helped into a pair of handcuffs. And the pictures of the makeshift furniture barricades created by congressmen and women and their staffers to keep the domestic terrorists from breaking into their offices or wherever they had sought safety from the insurrection that was taking place inside their building. Excuse me. A few months ago, right before Thanksgiving, I talked about trying to find the silver lining, even in the middle of a pandemic, or even in the middle of Wednesday's attempted coup. On Thursday, that's what my wife had done. She talked about the Senate staff members, young women who thought to secure and take the boxes with the official Electoral College certificates that had yet to be opened, or Arizona Representative Ruben Gallego, who relied on his training with the Marines and stood on a chair on the House floor, telling colleagues how to put on their gas masks and guiding them to the exits. Or Pennsylvania Representative Connor Lamb, who once the building had been secured, dared to call some of his House colleagues liars later that evening, almost prompting a physical altercation. Or Colin Allred, the former NFL linebacker turned lawyer and Texas representative, who was the first to jump to Lamb's defense, forcing those on the other side of the aisle to rethink their approach and sulk back to their seats. In 10 more days, the new administration will take office, ushering in hope, common sense, morality, human decency, inclusion, empathy, compassion, as we learned about during A Time for All Ages, and humility, all qualities that have been lacking in the White House over the last 4 years. In the meantime, at work, we've been told to try to obtain the COVID vaccine ourselves, with the sign-up process beginning tomorrow, with limited vaccine slots available and tens of thousands of first responders and educators expected to flood the county website in the hopes of securing an appointment. I hate being a pessimist, but I don't like my odds very much. And while I feel as though I'm playing Russian roulette with my health every day, I am thankful each morning when I wake up without a sore throat, headache, and still have my sense of taste and smell. I've shared with you before that one of my favorite TV shows of all time is The West Wing. I recently rewatched the season 2 Christmas episode in which the Deputy Chief of Staff, Josh Lyman, played by Bradley Whitford, is forced to meet with a trauma psychologist on Christmas Eve. After a grueling day-long session, Josh emerges to find the Chief of Staff, Leo McGarry, played by the late John Spencer, sitting in the lobby and waiting for Josh. Leo tells Josh the following parable, and I have a poster of it in my office at school. This guy's walking down a street when he falls into a hole. The walls are so steep he can't get out. A doctor passes by and the guy shouts up, "Hey you, can you help me out?" The doctor writes a prescription, throws it down in the hole, and moves on. Then a priest comes along and the guy shouts up, "Father, I'm down in this hole. Can you help me out?" And the priest writes out a prayer, throws it down in the hole, and moves on. Then a friend walks by. "Hey, Joe, it's me. Can you help me out?" And the friend jumps in the hole. Our guy says, "Are you stupid? Now we're both down here." And the friend says, "Yeah, but I've been down here before and I know the way out." While none of us have been down the hole that contains both a worldwide pandemic and a divided country in desperate need of healing, I think we all have people in our lives, maybe close friends, maybe family, or as Teresa and I have discovered in our case, maybe not all family, but we know people who know the way out. Lean on those folks right now as we try to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And if you know the way out, look for the people who might be stumbling around, lost in the darkness and in need of assistance. If there's one thing I know about our congregation, it's that we don't walk by and just throw notes down into the hole. Once again, good morning. Welcome to all, and let's worship together.
Well, Dave, don't hold back now, dude. But now it's time to think about how we can help out. And I'm wandering around our campus, and one of the things I thought about as Dave spoke was when Fred Rogers advised children that when it was a tough time and they're watching bad things happen, to look for the helpers. Well, this is your moment to be a helper. You help by being part of this community, which stands for the compassion, the healing, the hope, the justice that seems so often absent. Whether you text, whether you click, whether you call, whether you send a check, that helps us and we help the world. So we hope that you will take the news of the week as an inspiration to recommit to institutions that build, that heal, that hope, that know the way out.
Please join me in this prayer, this song, singing filled with loving kindness.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May loving kindness. May we be well, may we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well, may we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. May all be filled with loving kindness. May all be well. May all be filled with loving kindness. May all be well. May all be peaceful and at ease. May all be whole.
Well, I'm here in our here in the courtyard, and I want people to notice there's a tree back there. We have two wonderful trees in our courtyard. This is one. There's another one right there. I need trees because I think they're the wisest creatures on the planet. They know how to be alive and be still. They know how to be present and quiet. They know how to endure. I look at that tree and realize that it was there long before this building was built. I realize that its leaves have provided shade for children for now years, that its roots are underneath my feet as I stand nearby, that it has a wholeness, as the song said. In our time of prayer, we should be asking, who shall I be in this moment and time? And I'm guessing I want to be more like a tree. Can you imagine a tree that you would be? Imagine it young, just beginning to come above the earth. Imagine the slow progress of time, of years, as you get wider and taller, wrapping each new year around the last year, enclosing your past, growing into a future, leaving nothing behind, but always reaching taller. What tree would you be? Would you have leaves or needles? Would your fruit fill the bellies of hungry animals? Or would they scatter in the wind like dust and fall their pollen and drop their pollen like gold upon the grass? What tree would you be? What tree would you want us to be? What forest should we be as a community of faith, as a nation, as a world? I wish you to put those things into prayer as we try to make sense of a difficult week and remember that the sun and the moon and the stars are still there and they will follow us wherever we go. And the trees will look upon us and be gracious unto us. And the more we look to them, the more likely we are to find that loving kindness that we just sang about. And now some special music as we keep our hearts ready for the days ahead.
not stop singing. We will not stop singing. We will not stop singing till the world can hear the song, till the world can sing along. We will not stop marching. We will not stop marching. We will not stop marching till the world can hear the song, till the world can sing along. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along.
We will not stop praying. We will not stop praying. We will not stop praying till we all can get along, till the world can sing our song. We will not stop shouting. We will not stop shouting. We will not stop shouting. Shouting right from wrong till the world can sing our song. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along. We will not stop singing. We will not stop singing. We will not stop singing till the world can hear our song, till the world can sing along.
Every week, I should thank all the people who have made this occasion possible. Dave, for your forthright opinions. Katie, for bringing yourself back and bringing your engaging presence. Our tech team, whom you don't get to see, but Izzy and Blake and Libby, and they're not the only ones because we get other tech folk. Marcy, who was, well, Marcy is kind of the center that holds it all together sometimes. I'm so fortunate. And I want to give a shout out to the First Unitarian Congregational Society of Brooklyn, whose choir you just heard. I served that church from 1994 to 2005. And I see faces in that choir that I know, and it's a joy to see them. And that gratifies me because the work we are about this week is tough work. It's hard and our hearts are heavy. So I want you to notice how many faces are out there. And as Dave said when he was talking about that parable that he stole from the West Wing, which is in fact the Good Samaritan parable, just recrafted for a new day. What it comes down to is that when we hold ourselves together, we can go where we need to go. But I'm going to start my thoughts about this past week with two stories, one old and one new. The first one, actually, I can date very clearly, even though I don't remember it. It was September of 1953, and I was 7 months old. And my parents were taking a short holiday over the Labor Day weekend. And we lived in Washington, D.C. Dad worked for the Department of Commerce, in fact. And they took that holiday to go in their car with me. I was their firstborn, down to Tidewater, Virginia, where mansions and houses like Mount Vernon were. And that was the thing to do, to go look at these stately old colonial homes. And one of them was Stratford Hall. Now, Stratford Hall is downriver from Mount Vernon. I think it may be on the Rappahannock. I can't remember. I was 7 months old after all. And here's the deal. There were not many people there, and there's my mother holding a squirmy 7-month-old. And the women who were the tour guides, who all worked for the Robert E. Lee Memorial Association, noticed that I was squirming. And they went up to my mother and said very gently with a Southern lilt, would the child like to take a nap in General Lee's cradle? And so my greatest brush with fame happened when I was 7 months old, and I was laid in the cradle of Robert E. Lee and took a nap there. Now my second story. My second story is that happened this week, and that story is about Neil Sheehan. You may not have noticed, but he died this week. He was 80-some years old. He died on Thursday, the 7th. He was a reporter for most of his career for the New York Times, and during his career, he was the one who famously obtained the Pentagon Papers from Daniel Ellsberg. And those who know the story know that that was a controversial and difficult time. And for those who don't know further, those previously classified papers were first published by the Unitarian Universalist Association through Beacon Press. So we have a connection to Neil Sheehan. But the reason that we should know that is the Pentagon Papers began to reveal the extent to which the Johnson administration and the Pentagon and others had systematically lied, deceived, and evaded telling the American people about what was going on in Vietnam. They hid it. They spun it. They did whatever they could to tell us we were winning and all was going to turn out all right. Some years later, Neil Sheehan published a book about the life of an Army Lieutenant Colonel Paul Vann. And that book was called A Bright Shining Lie, in which he detailed how the war in Vietnam was never going to go well, and that Paul Vann was kind of doomed to see it through. And in fact, he died in service. Now, you might think these two stories have almost nothing to do with each other or with the momentous happenings last week, but you will see presently that they are of one cloth that reaches from the despicable event this week on January 6th, back to my birthday in February of 1953, back to 1807 when Robert E. Lee was born, even back to the birth of the nation. When future historians detail the recent moment that we have been through, they will inevitably be drawn back to Vietnam. Why? Because that was the watershed moment when America went from believing in their government to doubting them. Those who lived through those years, and that includes me, learned from Neil Sheehan and others how our leaders deceived us about the war, deceived themselves about its viability, and eroded our willingness to believe in them by so doing. Protests grew and grew over those years. Young men burned their draft cards. Some fled to Canada, others went underground, others went to jail. The long-held notion that one should defend your country almost automatically evaporated when the folly of the war came home in books, newspapers, television reports, and from those who lived there, who went there. Of course, this was not universally shared. You ever hear of the generation gap? Well, that's when it started to open up in a big way. For those who served in Korea and Europe during World War II, who felt pride in their service and that those were worth doing, protesters to them looked like unpatriotic shirkers and cowards. Young people, in turn, derided their elders for ignoring the truth and believing some sanitized story that cleaned the blood and guts off of reality. Even when the Vietnam War ended and the truth of its deception became utterly undeniable to anyone, there remained a sense of grievance on both sides. Those who resisted and those who served came away with a growing cynicism about politicians and government overall. Remember that bumper sticker, "Question authority"? Yeah. It was a slogan then, but it became true for those both on the left and ultimately on the right. If you want to know where the suspicion of government started for our times, it was in Vietnam. Add in Watergate, which happened at the end of the war, and millions of Americans truly lost faith in their national leaders. Well, there's always been reason to question authority. Let me make that clear right away. Democracy itself, our federal form of government, our systems premised on questioning unchallenged power. That's something we saw enacted in high relief this past week or two when the Secretary of State of Georgia refused, despite being a Republican, to go along with the Republican president's demand that he change the vote, because he worked for a state and not the federal government. He also had honor, and for that I respect him. But because we have a federal form of government, because we are allowed to vote mostly, the tyrannical potential of unchecked power is often evaded. But that tree of cynicism, it didn't grow as big as it did all by itself. Future historians will note that the conservative party of our era, which is the Republican Party, I say that of our era because a century ago, it was the Democratic Party that was the conservative party. But the current conservative party has actually watered and fed the tree of cynicism, and not just in the past 4 years. It's been doing so for a generation. For reasons too many and too entangled for me to articulate in a sermon, that party has found it effective to sow doubt about government and leadership, along with its promise that it would change everything if they got elected. In a curious irony, that same party discovered that cynical people are also the most credulous. They're yearning to believe something, even if not the thing that they stopped believing in. This is important, so you need to pay attention. Feeling betrayed, the cynical are in some ways more susceptible to believing rather than less. Sometimes, somewhat like a betrayed spouse feels both angry and hurt, the cynical want an explanation, but they also want assurance that they were not wrong. Into this need comes the next bright, shining lie. The promise of a restored America, where rugged individuals can range free of government intrusion. That never existed, but it allures itself on others with its promise of righting what was wrong, restoring what was lost, and vindicating what was rejected. It is its own bright, shining lie. And that's where the first story comes back in, and that's why it matters. Because in a real sense, we have all slept in Robert E. Lee's cradle. The world of this new bright, shining lie ultimately is the same world Robert E. Lee was born in, that he believed in, that he defended in the Confederate War against the Union. And it's the same world that President Donald Trump has promised to restore. Oh, maybe not with the bougainvillea growing throughout America, maybe not with people enslaved and in chains, but a world where freedom means that things like gender and race and religion are tidy and separate and dutifully subservient to those who should be in charge. They want us all to be as well behaved as the dowagers of the Robert E. Lee Memorial Association, bowing and gently acknowledging the superiority of those who are strong. This past week, Professor Karen Cox of the University of North Carolina skillfully showed how every trope and phrase of Donald Trump's words and actions correlate to the lost cause mythology that arose in the South after its defeat. Forgive me for citing her at length, but it's truly worth sharing. This appeared in the New York Times, as I recall. She writes, Mr. Trump's lost cause mirrors that of Robert E. Lee. His dedicated followers do not see him as having failed them, but as a man who was failed by others. Mr. Trump represents their values, and the cause he represents is their cause too. Just as General Lee helped lead and sustain the Confederacy over 4 years, Mr. Trump has also been a sort of general in a campaign of disinformation. And if there was ever a campaign of disinformation, writes Professor Cox, the lost cause of the Confederacy was it. The Confederacy, the lie went, failed only because of the North's superior numbers and resources, but it went further than that. As the editor of a Richmond newspaper who coined the term lost cause wrote in 1866, the Confederates have gone out of this war with the proud, secret, dangerous consciousness that they are the better men. She continues, applying this to our current situation. Mr. Trump's tweet to his followers echoed those same sentiments. He referred to his cause as sacred and to those who supported him as great patriots. And he admonished them to remember this day forever. That is how the original lost cause emerged. And if history repeats itself in the decades ahead, Trump Republicans will continue to defend what he began, think of it as a patriotic duty, and not only will they never forget, they will most likely perpetuate these sentiments into future generations. Modern American conservatism, as I have said for years, even when I was a candidate, modern American conservatism is essentially neo-Confederacy, a restoration not of America that we think of, but of the Confederate version of America. It may not use the words of race. It may not speak of slavery. It in fact says that it's not racist at all. It is well hid behind libertarianism, individualism, moralism, and patriotism. But with Donald Trump's administration, the 7 veils of deception have slowly come off. And we saw on Wednesday its genuine atavistic soul. Wednesday was Epiphany in the Christian calendar. And if you know what the word means, it was an epiphany for millions of Americans for whom it was a revelation of the tragic and cruel beliefs and actions of some of our fellow citizens. But do not think this one feverish moment killed the disease any more than the Civil War killed off racism. The appeal of the bright, shining lie is immense. Maybe you know William Faulkner's famous comment, he being of the South himself, the past isn't dead, it's not even past. I grew up in Maryland, just below the Mason-Dixon line. We did not play cops and robbers when I was a kid. We played blues and grays, and everybody wanted to be a Reb. They were the cool ones. That is the bright, shining lie. And I grew up with it. And what's more, you did too. Even if you grew up in northernmost Minnesota or the furthest reaches of Maine, we live in a country that is romanticized, excused, and made heroic the Confederate way of life. It is time to recognize that our president has evoked that, commanded that, stoked that, and it's come back to life. Because, and you need to know that because when he leaves office, which he will, that will not end it. It was there before him, and it will be there after him. And nor can one president, even Joe Biden, fix it. Nor can his administration, nor can a House of Congress or 2 houses of Congress do it in the next 2 years or 4 years. Because the parasite of supremacy, of white supremacy, of Confederacy, lives in all of us. and it will come back to haunt our nation until it is eradicated. Now, next week on the King Weekend, I will speak to the spiritual dimensions of his work. Right now, though, I have to talk about what we need to do now. Much more will be required. And what we will have to do will still not be enough. But I'm going to start with words from the great rabbi from America, Abraham Yehoshua Heschel, who in response to the Holocaust said, "Some are guilty, but all are responsible." If only some are formally guilty of crimes this past week, and there's no doubt many of them are, all of us are responsible for dealing with its rise and its eradication. The repair of the nation falls on all of our shoulders, but it will take courage and leadership, and that is something in short supply among our elected officials right now. And that's where we as a spiritual community come in. Now, I'm a biblical guy, not because I believe it, but because I believe it is powerful. In the Jewish scriptures, there's the story of Nehemiah and his comrade Ezra. Nehemiah is sent back from Babylon sent back from Persia to a wasted Jerusalem where the walls have been torn down and fallen down over the years. And he says to the people who have come back, "Come, let us rebuild the walls and we will no longer be in disgrace." At first people say, "Oh, what's the bother? Oh, you're foolish to try to do that." There's no purpose in that. But then the high priest set to work with his fellow priests and they rebuilt one of the gates. They consecrated it and set up its doors. After that, others came and did the same. And the Bible records each clan and family building up part of the walls. But did you notice it was the priest, it was the spiritual leader who had to model what needed to be done? That it is incumbent upon religious people, and we are religious, to show what must be done. We live in a very religious nation. We should exploit that from time to time. You and me and all our fellow religious liberals, because we can help repair the trust. We can help rebuild the walls that protect us from the winds and whims of power. And today, the nation needs leadership from people like us, but not just us, every house of worship. We have to begin the repair because moral leadership is needed when elected leadership is lacking. Yes, the abuse of power that tore down the walls of trust must be denounced. Our own association has done that, but that's not enough. We have to pick up the stones as well. We must take responsibility as name irresponsibility. We cannot simply ask the others to do the work that we could have done ourselves over the years, because religious leaders as a whole are as responsible as anyone else for where we are now. We did not speak loudly when the acid of cynicism ate away the mortar that held those stones in place. We did not speak up loudly when the raw competition for power turned the stones that protected us into missiles with which we battered each other. We did not speak up and act up enough when self-righteousness was used to justify contempt for our fellow citizens. Whether by commission or omission, religious leaders and communities abdicated their responsibility by failing to condemn it forthrightly then, accepting it as the cost of doing business later, and failing to repair it when it happened. I believe every congressperson, every clergy person, especially myself, every house of worship, including ourselves, and every denomination needs to admit its moral failure to protect and defend democracy in this nation. We need to denounce those who abused power and privilege, to be sure. We need to name it, but then we need to take responsibility to repair it ourselves. Now, other preachers will say it better. Others have more melodious voices in taller pulpits, and they will command larger audiences. I only have you and we are a small community. But I dare not be silent until others speak, and we dare not be silent until others speak. We must speak and act now. The stones of ruined democracy are all around us. We must blame those who tore them down, but we too must rebuild them. And though we cannot rebuild the citadel of liberty and justice by ourselves, we have the power to lift up at least one stone and put it back. Let us find that stone. Let us as a community rebuild the walls of liberty and justice. Because if we do not, our children and grandchildren will wonder why we were not there when they needed us. On that sober note, I say thank you again for allowing me to share my thoughts with you on a Sunday. I wish that we could do more, but we will do what we can. I implore you as a community to think very hard about speaking up as a community and taking responsibility in whatever way we can find. You are a great people. Let us be to work at reclaiming the greatness, the moral greatness that we have always aspired to. With that, I say amen. And I invite us now to sing together. Is that not the next thing we're doing? Thank you, Dave. He's given me the right nod. Okay, shall we gather our hearts in song with gratitude for being together?
That is good.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
The wonderful Olympia Brown, Universalist minister, prophet in her own era, said, "We can never make the world safe by fighting. Every nation must learn that the people of all nations are children of God and must share the wealth of the world. You may say this is impractical, far away, can never be accomplished, but it is the work we are appointed to do." So may it be. And now I invite Dave Juday to lead us in extinguishing the chalice as we go into our congregational conversation.
Thank you, Fred. Please join me in saying the words that we use to extinguish our chalice. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again. A reminder that in just a bit, you will have the chance to join one of our breakout rooms. Also, if you are a visitor, please don't join one of the breakout rooms. Instead, stay here on the main call so that you can talk with Reverend Fred. Finally, a shout out to Izzy, Libby, and Blake for our outstanding, hardworking, and behind-the-scenes tech crew this morning. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Now, to lead the congregational conversation, I'm pleased to hand things off to Debbie Grande.